This is Boss Hog. I'm with Justin with Boom Chicka Cow Cow. We're from Overland Park, Kansas, and we're proudly sponsored by Casey Grilling Company and partnered up with Prairie Fresh.
Today we'll be cooking a Prairie Fresh USA Prime bone-in pork loin, which we're going to turn into a crown pork roast stuffed with an apple fritter bread pudding. Pork and pudding, baby. We're going to cut open our pork loin today and begin the trimming process, and we'll show you how to trim any unnecessary parts off, as well as French the pork loin, which will expose the bone and kind of create the crown shape that we're looking for today's roast. And we're going to begin trimming the bones. We're going to French the bones, which will expose the bones to create the crown shape that we're looking for this roast. There's several parts to this process which we're going to walk you through. And the first is we're going to clean off any chine bone that's remaining from the butchering process. Prairie Fresh does actually a really good job of trimming their meat into the package. I'm only feeling just a few chine bones, and we're going to pick those off ever so slightly without digging into the meat. So we'll do that now. The chine bone is just a little piece of bone cartilage that you feel beneath the actual rib bone, and you'll feel it towards one end more so than the other end. So I'm feeling about 3 in this particular, which isn't bad at all. Next thing we're going to do is look for any exposed bone. So there's one bone down here that's right at the edge. We'll see if we're going to use that, but first we're going to take the membrane off, just as you would a rack of ribs. You're going to take off the membrane from the back side of the bone. We're going to try to reserve as much of this fat as possible. It's already trimmed pretty well. There's not much fat in the pork loin itself, so that'll help insulate the pork loin for you while you cook it. So we're going to save all that. But we are going to cut about 1.5 to 2 inches of the bone, of the meat on top of the bone. Just cut right across the side and then trim it off. If you're into making sausages or meatballs, this trimmings that we're taking off, you can save, grind down, make a nice sausage out of it, make a nice meatball, freeze it, use it for later. So this part, we're going to start exposing the bone, and this is what will start forming the actual crown. So we're going to trim in between each bone and just take out the excess meat. And once you do this once, it really does become much easier. So, we're trimming 2 pork loins today to make our crown roast. The first one will take you a little bit longer, but once you do it once, that second one should be a pretty quick and easy process for you to get all the cartilage off. Now, this is not a completed product. We're actually going to strip the remaining membrane and cartilage off these bones, so they'll be nice and clean, just like you've eaten a nicely cooked rib bone. That's all you'll see is a nice exposed rib. We've got both pork loins trimmed. We're going to score between each bone about 1 inch down. And why we do that is when we try to create the crown roast, scoring it on the exterior will allow us to form it a little bit more to create the circle that we're aiming for.
All right, what we'll use for a binder is some duck fat that you can get here at Casey Grilling Company. I'll just spray the Prairie Fresh pork loins to get a nice even coat on there. Use my hand to smooth it in, and don't be bashful. And then we're going to come in with some Morton's kosher salt. We're going to come across here. We'll pat that in so it applies to the Prairie Fresh pork. Then we're going to come in with the brand new Grill All DB180. Grill All, you can use this on any cuts of meat, and it's going to bring great flavor, savory, and it's going to really pop when we use this, as well as the Fergalicious American Pie Love that is going to have the cherry and apple accent for our pork roast, crown roast.
The Grill All is a no sugar product as well, so with the salt and the Grill All, we're not adding any sugar to the pork roast. It will help from burning. So we're going to add a little bit of sugar at the end with the American Pie Love, as well as to add a little bit more flavor pop to go with our apple fritter bread pudding.
And if you guys haven't tried either one of these rubs, they're fantastic. I highly recommend both of them, and they're both sold here at Casey Grilling Company.
We're ready to form the crown roast, and we're going to use these metal skewers to kind of help hold it together while we put the roast together. There's 2 of us here today, but maybe at home it's just you, so these metal skewers will help keep the roast together while you tie it off with some butcher string. So we'll put it up on end here. I'm going to put that one up. Let's put them end to end. And so really we're just going to take these 2 end pieces and just hold them together for now. And before we do that, put it together, we're going to put this foil. We just took a roll of foil. It's going to help keep the mold. We're not going to put the apple fritter bread stuffing into the pork loin just yet. It's going to cook about an hour before we do that. So we're going to put this foil as a replacement. When we're ready to add the bread pudding later, we'll simply remove it and we'll have a nice vessel for the bread pudding.
So we'll go ahead and repeat the process of using the skewers just to hold the meat in place until we're able to tie it off.
And we're going to get just underneath the bottom or top of the rib bone that's on the meat side. And we'll get right underneath that and we'll pull and cinch it up. Some people use a butcher's knot. I'm not a butcher, so I'm just going to do a pretty simple knot. So we'll continue to get it tighter as we go. Just throw that on top for now. We'll cut off the scraps at the end. And really just trying to get the end pieces tight together.
And at the end of the day, don't worry too much about the bones if they're not completely uniformed. At the end of the day, just let the Prairie Fresh pork be the star of the show. So just to kind of kick it up an extra notch, what we recommend doing is just cut off some pieces of aluminum foil to cover the bones. So when we do put that out on the pit or your smoker, we don't want the bones to get charred or burnt within the first hour. After the first hour, we'll go ahead and remove the foil off the bone. So right now, all I did was cut out 14 pieces of foil. I'm just gonna put them over the bones just to protect them. And again, it's just for presentation for you and your guests for the wow factor.
And when we put the bread pudding on, in about an hour after this goes on the smoker, we're gonna pull those foil tips off and let it finish off. We're going to put the crown roast in a large pan. This will be for a couple reasons. More as a roasting effect like you'd use in your oven. So we're going to be using a Green Mountain Grill pellet grill today, and the heat comes up from the bottom similar to an oven. So we'll use the roasting pan for the pork loin roast. You can do this directly on the grates if you'd like, but because we're putting a bread pudding stuffing in there today, we want to retain the juices that are part of that bread pudding, and so we're keeping it in the roasting pan for our cook today. You can use any type of apple. You can use a Granny Smith, a Golden Delicious, really any apple of your choosing that you'd probably use in an apple pie generally. And then we'll just cut around the core of the apple, discarding the core. And then we'll take the additional apple and just cut it into 1/2-inch cubes. Would be sufficient for this recipe. And then we're going to take apple fritter. If you can't find these monstrous apple fritters in your hometown, just find something at your local donut shop. You ultimately need about 4 cups of apple fritter for this recipe, so it might take 2, 3, or 4 of those apple fritters to make this recipe, but just find something that you like. So we'll just measure that out. This is a 4 cup pint here. Any type of bread pudding, you're going to want to use a soft bread, not a hard bread, to really absorb the other ingredients and the custard that you're going to put in here. So that's about 4 cups. So 1 large fritter we'll put into our bowl. Lastly is about 1/2 cup of golden raisins, and we'll throw that in there as well. So that's it for our dry ingredients. We're going to make a custard mix now. Hog here. We're going to add 1 3/4 cup of milk. You can use a whole milk, 2%, heavy cream, whatever you like. This is a whole milk from Chateau Dairy. We're going to add a 1/4 cup of margarine, and then 1 cup of brown sugar that's been packed. And we're going to mix that together, and we're actually going to put it on our smoker We need to heat it up, melt the butter down, dissolve the sugars. You can do this on your stovetop if you like, in a saucepan. Anyway, you just need to heat up that margarine, the milk, the sugar, get it all dissolved, and then we'll add it into our bread mixture. So we're gonna take 2 eggs, a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, as well as a half a teaspoon of vanilla. We'll call that a scotch in our world, but just a little splash of vanilla, just a little bit more. There you go. And we'll whisk that all together. And when our milk and butter and sugar recipe is ready, we'll combine both and put them in the bread pudding and let that soak for about 30 to 60 minutes if you can, to let all that moisture soak into the bread. Our milk, brown sugar, and margarine is warm, melted, and off the hot smoker. We're gonna add that into our bread and apple and raisin mixture. And we're also gonna add in the egg mixture. We're gonna mix it in by hand. And just let it incorporate. You'll have a little bit of extra liquid in here at first, but if you give it 30 to 60 minutes, that liquid's going to absorb into the apple fritter. So by the time you stuff it into your crown roast, there should be just a little bit of liquid left over in reserve at that point. Most everything should be absorbed into the bread. So this is kind of what it looks like, very loose right now, but after about an hour it should be nice and firm and should expand with moisture.
It smells amazing. You can smell the fresh apples and the cinnamon mixing in with the bread. Can't wait with the finished product.
Our Prairie Fresh USA Prime Pork Crown Roast is done. If you could be in here and smell this, it smells amazing. We cooked it for about 2.5 hours at 325 on our Green Mountain Grill. Just over, it's at 145 internal temperature. We've rested it for about 15 minutes now, and we're ready to clip the twine and cut into it. We finished up our Prairie Fresh USA Prime Pork Crown Roast. We've topped off our apple fritter bread pudding with this KC Grilling Company apple pie syrup. Pork and pudding is where it's at. Peace.